What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY and the overall market, and break down what's going on with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about other pieces of news that are out there, which you should be watching for as time progresses. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Webull link. If you deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 free stocks. If you deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 in total. And deposit $25,000 or more, and you're guaranteed 75. The offer ends in just about 16 days from now, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. So, as far as Tesla goes, Tesla's been dipping quite a bit for the last couple of weeks. It's been on a bit of a downtrend, but one thing that's very interesting is the fact that it's attempting to base right over here around this 215 area. So the question is, will Tesla hold this support, or is Tesla about to see a rug pull? That's going to depend on many pieces of data and what happens with the news for tomorrow, and also other factors like that. However, so far it's holding up very, very nicely. And what typically happens is Tesla does attempt to rebound a bit when we see moves like this. So there's a chance Tesla could attempt to rebound temporarily, but that does not necessarily mean that Tesla is done with the downside. There's still that risk later on as time goes on. So I'll talk more about this in just a couple of minutes, but I first want to talk about some data. So as a reminder, tomorrow is going to be Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. There's not really much data coming out. We just have some export and import prices coming out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But then at 11:30 a.m., we have the 17-week bill auctions. That's the most significant time when there might be some volatility. Besides that, everything else is very minor. By the way, for those who are new or those who are overseas, I'm talking about Eastern Standard Time. So this is in New York time for the USA. So this is the time I usually go by because that's the same time that the stock market follows. Now, the market saw a bit of a sell off, and that's part of the reason why Tesla really struggled to hold up. We actually saw this bigger sell off for the broader markets as we were looking at SPY, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, and many of these other stocks and ETFs. So the market saw a dip today because of lots of uncertainty involving the Middle East situation, and that also affected Tesla. So what's happening with the situation? Well, let me just clarify that I'm not here to give you guys a history lesson. You know, the whole history between these countries goes back for many, many years. I'm just here to say that with the recent attack that happened by Iran against Israel, I'm not saying it started by that. I'm just saying that that's what happened recently as a result of so many things in the past. They basically did that, and there's been a lot of a talk by Israel of about how they want to kind of like retaliate against Iran. Now, there's been a lot of talk very recently about how they're getting ready for an attack back, and they've basically narrowed their targets, and they're saying that they're not going to be striking against nuclear facilities or oil facilities, and they may just go for those military bases. Now, we'll have to see about that just to be safe, but this is what reports are suggesting. Now, there's a high possibility it may be happening over the next couple of days, if not as soon as by tomorrow. We might be getting some news that Israel has started to retaliate. In that case, it's not great news because it could affect oil, and it also depends on where they retaliate. So we're still waiting to see confirmation of that. Now, if they do it, right, Iran has come out and they're saying that they're going to be doing the same thing back. So there's just like a big back and forth, which is not great for crude and many other things like that. It's not great for innocent lives, everyday people, and so many different factors like that as well. Just wanted to clarify that, like, this is, very serious. The U.S. is also getting involved, getting basically personnel, aircraft, and many different pieces of equipment out around the areas just to aid, particular sides, especially Israel. So I'm not here to really pick sides. I don't want to say that I'm siding with this side or the other. I'm just saying that this is very intense right now. This is part of why the stock market dropped. And if there is a big attack, and the market does dump, just hypothetically, just as the initial reaction, right? It's going to have an effect on Tesla. So please keep that in your guys' mind. That's something that could be happening overnight. For other things out there, we also have some earnings. I went over most of these earnings in the morning. So just as a reminder, Citi did relatively well, beating on EPS and revenue. So did Bank of America, Charles Schwab, and Goldman Sachs. All of them did relatively well. That's why the market gapped up and held up in the very beginning before it started to sell off because of this Israel news. Now, when it comes to tomorrow, it's going to be Wednesday. We have Morgan Stanley announcing earnings and a few more like ASML. After the market closes, it's going to be very minor, but this is in preparation for what's happening on Thursday as we have TSMC and Netflix announcing their earnings. Now, for other factors out there, there's been a lot of talk about what's happening in Germany. This news came out earlier today about how officials and authorities in Germany have once again approved the first stage of plant expansion. That's a good piece of news because it allows for Tesla to not only improve its capacities, but double them near the plant. And then it's going to help them with their sales, their growth, and very, very important things around the area. So this is good news. Basically, they proceeded with the first of three stages of the expansion. That's including construction, infrastructure of storage facilities, battery cell test laboratories, and logistics areas. So great news for Tesla getting this approval. Very, very bullish. I can't wait to see what else they're going to be doing in the long term. And this is going to help bring in a lot more revenue, at least for Tesla. Now, as interest rates begin to drop, it may have a big effect on Tesla, at least later on down the line. That doesn't necessarily mean that Tesla is free from the other issues involved, right? Because we're seeing higher interest rate environments in like Europe and also in the US. The recessionary environments will affect Tesla sales. They're already affecting Tesla, like Europe, for example. That's why we saw their sales slump a little bit. So what's happening is the effects of the high interest rates will affect Tesla for like the more short term. I still believe in that. I still think that a recessionary environment would make things harder for Tesla for the short term, but the long term is still very bright because as interest rates drop, Tesla sales will improve, and then Tesla will also be working to make their vehicles more affordable. So there's going to be a lot of different factors like that. But once again, I'm still very bullish for the long term for Tesla. So this news is very bullish for the long term. When they start expanding their capacity over the next few years, what's going to happen is their sales will eventually keep up with that as interest rates start dropping. For the short term, there's going to be some hardships such as high interest rates, not to mention other factors. But for the medium term, we're going to be just fine. For volume, we only had about 62 million in volume, a little bit low volume, which is not the best for Tesla. Short volume is also dipping a little bit. And then if you look at these analyst ratings, Goldman Sachs gave Tesla a neutral rating. Roth MKM also gave us a neutral rating alongside Cantor Fitzgerald. So a lot of ratings from these analysts all saying the same things. Everyone is kind of reducing their ratings on Tesla and becoming like more neutral, especially after the 10-10 event. The price price ratio is dipping, so Tesla's losing a lot of strength compared to the markets. We tend to see more seasonality, higher volatility on Wednesdays. We're only green about 48% of the time, so it's not that great. And then for hourly seasonality, we tend to see a lot more volatility at 9 a.m. and also at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that being said, that's it for my analysis of the data. Now I just want to focus on the charts for the rest of the video. I just want to prioritize that as time goes on. So what do I see for Tesla in the markets? What is my personal opinion of Tesla? And the answer is right now, Tesla is kind of stuck in the middle, going back and forth in this range between the 215 area and about 225. Now, I want to say this. When you look at the daily, this is the support to watch for on Tesla. When you look at the daily chart, we have support at the 200 EMA. This is at this 214 to 215 area right over here. If we lose this support, see the red line here, if we lose this support right here, Tesla could easily fall all the way down to about 202. So if we lose support at 212 to 214, I think Tesla dumps all the way down to 202. So be very mindful of that. If we get some kind of hypothetical bad piece of news, that is on the table. Now, if Tesla's bullish and we manage to break past 225, we have the potential to try to get back up to where this previous support was, becoming resistance at 227. If we get above that, we're looking for 230 as our next target. So it's going to be your bullish targets, 225, 227, and 230. And the bearish target is going to be basically this 219 areas our support. If that fails us, we're looking for basically 217, 215, and then 212. What do I think Tesla's going to do? What is my opinion of Tesla? Well, honestly, don't forget that Tesla is very news dependent. But looking at the chart, we do look like we are going to attempt to base right here. So it's trying to hold support near the 214 zone. There's going to be a good chance of Tesla trying to get back up towards that 225 area, but then it might slow down after that. So I think there's a chance that Tesla could go for that 225 area tomorrow morning, try to rebound for that. This depends on the news involving Israel, of course, but there is still a risk of us rejecting and continuing this downtrend because we're making lower highs and lower lows. We're continually doing that. We could rebound a bit for 225, then reject, but I still think that the downside risk is there, especially as we haven't fully filled this gap quite yet. So look for a temporary bounce and some more risks of downside and keep that in your guys' minds. As far as SPY goes, I just want to mention that SPY is in a very interesting place because we have this rising wedge, right? And we're actually back in it. So we tried to break out of it yesterday only to fail. So it's not doing that great of a job. So from what I see, here's how I think this is going to go. We're basically barely holding our 20 EMA at 579. If we lose 579, we're going to be looking for a bigger dip all the way down towards 577. 577.5 is where we had previous resistance becoming support. If that fails us, we get closer to 575. If we manage to bounce and break past 580, we're looking for an attempt for 582.25. If we break that, we're looking for a bounce back up to where these highs were. In my opinion, what's looking more probable is we're looking a little bit more bearish. Depends on the Israel news, of course, but this looks like it could rebound a bit and start dipping lower for the 579 area, if not a little bit lower if that fails us. Let's look for a big test tomorrow. We're going to likely see a lot of volatility approaching the big event, and there is still that risk of us getting closer to 575 if 579 fails us. So keep that in mind. We still look more bearish on SPY. We do favor downside a little bit more, so be very mindful of that. We'll see what happens involving Israel, but we still look a bit more bearish. For ES, we have resistance at 58.69. If that breaks, we're looking for 5900. If we don't hold above that, we're looking for a dip back down towards the low at 58.50. If that fails us, we're looking for 58.33. This is suggesting to me that downside is looking a little bit more imminent. We could retest 58.69 tomorrow morning, but then if Israel, does the retaliation attack or something happens and the market dips a bit, that could lead to us dipping all the way down towards 58.33. So I see a risk of us dipping a little bit lower. So please keep that in your guys' minds. For Nvda, we have 133 as resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 135. And if we end up losing 129, we're looking for a dip back down towards this 127.5 area. We're completely range bound right here. So I think that there's a risk of us dipping lower. We could rebound a bit and start dipping lower for that 129 target. If that fails us, we're looking for a bigger dip back down to 125. So I think what's going to happen to Nvidia is very simple. We test 129 tomorrow. If that does not hold, we're looking for a bigger jump down to about 125. So keep that in mind. We'll see which way this ends up going. For Bitcoin, Bitcoin's once again forming a nice looking trend right over here. We're attempting to push higher, so we have this resistance to watch for at this 68,000 area, and the support to watch for is going to be around 66,000. Now, there is a risk of us retesting 66,000 before it tries to rebound, but I still see that downside risk, so be very mindful of that. For other tickers out there, we have NQ. This is still looking a little bit more bearish. If we reclaim 20,350, we could attempt to get close to 20,500. If not, there's a risk of us coming all the way down to 20,200. If that fails us, we look even more bearish. This is looking a little bit weaker right here, so I see a risk of 20,200 being tested, but we'll have to see how it goes depending on Israel, so watch and see. For the QQQ, look a little bit more bearish. We need to reclaim 492. If we get back above that, we're looking for a bounce back up towards at least 495. If we don't hold above 490, look for 488 as our support. If that fails us, we turn more bearish, and there's going to be a risk of us dipping all the way down to 485. My gut tells me that 488 is going to be tested, and I think that we might not hold. We look a little bit more bearish, so look for a little bit of downside going into tomorrow. We'll see what happens after that. For Aapl, Aapl has a slight bearish divergence that's developing. We need to try to get back above 236 to turn back up. And if we don't, we're at risk of coming all the way down towards 232. If that fails us, this 233 area, if that fails us, we're looking for a dip back down closer to 230. So we'll just have to see how things end up going. I think there's a good chance we see 233, so be very mindful of that, followed by the 230 area if that fails us. Aapl had good news that came out, considering the fact that they got some good news about their sales projections and then their iPhone sales going up, not to mention good revenue for Q3. However, it wasn't really enough for us to continue to hold after we got this news. So there is a risk of us dipping a little bit more close to 233 flats, then eventually back down closer to the lower 230s. There's still a high risk of that. With that being said, guys, that is it for my analysis of the main five. I'm going to make this video only like 6 or 7 minutes longer. Then I'm going to just talk about the rest of these real quick. So for Palantir, we have this resistance around this 42.6 area, followed by 44. And we have support to watch for at 41.5, followed by 40.8. This technical setup looks a little bit more bearish. We have 41.5 as our potential target, and there's a risk of us dipping a little bit lower. For Supermicro, we're just range bound right here. We're looking at for 46.91 as our support, and we have this resistance around this 49 area. So we're kind of stuck in the middle. We'll have to see which way we end up going back and forth and back and forth. But there is a risk of us coming all the way down to the 46s. So give us the time it needs. For Rivian, we're on a bit of a downtrend right over here. We have resistance to watch for a 10.36, followed by 10.69, and support is going to be very close to this 10 flat area. My gut tells me that 10 flat could be tested very, very soon. We could be dipping back down to about 9.8. So give this the time it needs. So far, I was attempting to look more bullish, trying to break out right here, but just know that there is a risk of it dipping a little bit. We have 10 flats as our support. If that fails us, we're looking for a move all the way down towards the 9.76 area. So I think that 9.76 is a very realistic target. I think 10 flat is going to be tested on SoFi as long as we don't break past 10.5. So it might pull back a little bit as we're starting to contract, but it's not that major. For the IWM Russell 2000, we popped all the way up towards this 225 area. We're starting to dip a little bit lower. Our support to watch for is going to be down here around 222. If that fails us, we're looking for basically 221. So I see a risk of us coming back down to 221 on the IWM because we grabbed some liquidity up here before we started to dip. So be very mindful of that. There is a risk of this dipping closer to about 221. For AMD, we look a little bit more bearish off this head and shoulders like structure. We could be dipping closer to where this gap happens to be. So make sure you watch the support right here around this 155 area. If that fails us, we're looking for this gap fill down to about 150. Now, if we hold support at 150, we could attempt to rebound, but I see a risk of us dipping lower. So watch and see this gap and be very mindful of that. For ARM, we're kind of rejecting here, forming a bearish divergence. Look at 151.6 as our resistance and 147.2 as our support. We're stuck in the middle. If 151.5 breaks, we're looking for a big push for 154. If we end up losing 147, we're looking for a dip back down towards 144. I think that it could go either way, but this is favoring downside a little bit more for the 147 target than maybe lower if that fails us. For a coin, we have a bearish divergence. Just know this: we hit 200. If 200 breaks, we turn up. If that rejects, we're looking for dip back down towards 190. I think the odds are favoring us dipping closer to about the 192 area than maybe even 188. So watch to see which way we end up going. That's going to be very, very key for us. For Amazon has this resistance around this 188 area, then 190. Our support to watch was at 186. If 186 fails us, we're looking for basically 183.6. So it could go either way. With the high up here, we came down, made a lower high. So this is at risk of dipping to about 186. I might dip to 186, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not. So look for a small dip tomorrow before anything else. It also depends on Israel, so be mindful of that. Meta is barely at support. So we have resistance at 588 and support at 581. Lose the 581, so we're going to be dipping all the way down to at least 578 or below. Break 588, and we're going to be looking more bullish for 592 plus. We're in the middle right now, so give this some time, but there is a risk of dipping all the way down to about 582. For Microsoft is rejecting right here. We have this resistance to watch for at 419. If that breaks, we're looking for 422. If this rejects, we could be tipping back down towards 415. Below that, we turn a little bit more bearish. Looking at the fact that we're making lower highs here, this is still suggesting I might be dipping back down towards this imbalance at 415. So keep that in mind, guys. There's a risk of this dipping. Google is making lower highs. If this is a rejection off 170, we're at risk of coming down to our EMAs at 165. So that's the most likely case. For other things out there, you have DJT looking more bearish. If 25.97 fails us, we're looking for a dip back down to 23.5. The VIX is attempting to rebound a bit. If we hold above 20.4 tomorrow, this could push higher. If it depends on Israel and other factors like that. If we end up losing 20.41, we could be dipping lower. So we'll see which way it ends up going. So far, it looks like it wants to bounce. It looks a little bit more bullish, which is bearish for the markets. The 10 years following the market, which is technically at least a little bit more bearish. And the dollar is more bullish if we hold above 103.07. If we hold above that, that's going to be bearish for the markets. If we lose that, that could be, once again, switching things to bullish. So we'll see which way it goes. With that being said, guys, I want to thank you all so much for listening. There's a rising wedge on SPY. It hasn't completely broken out yet. The same thing could be said about the S&P 500, ES, NASDAQ, NQ, and the QQQ. But we'll see if the wedges play out now or not. We're not ready yet. So we will see. We'll see what happens involving Israel and how this affects crude. As far as Tesla goes, there might be an attempt to rebound tomorrow, but there's no guarantee it's going to last. Could still get a rejection, start tipping lower later on, especially if we lose our support. So look for a rebound attempt in the morning, then potentially a dip, just like how we did today. And it might just continue to stay range bound for the time being. We'll see how things go, but I just want to say I really appreciate you guys one more time for listening. Have a great day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are around the world. And I'll be back for another video tomorrow morning before the market opens. Until then, thank you for listening. Tesla to the moon. The long term is still very bright, no matter what happens. Even if the short term is showing more downside, guys, please be very mindful of that. The long term is still very bright, so don't worry. And we're going to be completely fine. I thank you all so much for listening, and peace out.